interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome back, everybody. Your host, Michael. I decided to do a show here on Father James Altman, just a discussion on him. And I'm going to be bringing on here in just a moment Kevin Symonds. And I think this is his fourth or fifth show. So we've been doing a few shows lately, and they've been going great. So I thought he would be good to come on. And in fact, he had recommended doing the show, but I had already was deliberating doing one. And in fact, somebody asked me a question yesterday about Father Altman on the show, and I kind of offered my brief thoughts on him. But we'll do a little bit more today. I want to go ahead and bring him on here. So let's go ahead and transition to that segment. Let me bring him on here in just a second. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Hey, I'm all right. Although I'm part left, so I guess it's kind of not true to say I'm all right.
That's funny. Part left. And I like the setup. It's looking good there. You said that's a new camera and computer?
Yes. Well, the camera I've had for a little while now. It's it's trying to calibrate now with this new laptop and all this good stuff here.
I gotcha.
I'm also pulling up everything for the for tonight. I had to pull up some QE things here.
Yeah. So, when it comes to Father Altman, a lot of people have asked me about him. And I have not, dug very deeply into Father Altman and his content. So I can only speak about what I know. And it's not a whole lot. From what I've seen, there are some things that I completely agree with Father Altman on. His passion for the unborn, his zeal for the unborn and their rights, being outspoken against abortion. I'm right there with him. Being outspoken against bishops who are inconsistent and aren't defending unborns and their right to life and other things like that, in critiquing liberalism, things like that. I agree with those things, but then I've heard some other things from Father Altman that has made me pause. And I saw one video where he did with Church Militant, and it was definitely not the right approach, in my opinion. He was criticizing the bishops, and I agree with some of the
Episcopal carpet bombing. One from June,
right? And
I think
I agree. Yes, and I agree with a whole lot of the criticisms that are in the video. Much of what he said, I agree with. I guess it was just more the way in which it was delivered. Now, I hear quite a few people defend that and say, "Well, Jesus said this, and the apostles did this, and some of the saints did that." I understand. But there are many occasions in which Jesus did not act that way, and the apostles did not act that way, and many saints did not act that way, right? It takes prudence to know when to apply zeal in that kind of way that we might see in the Episcopal carpet bombing. And I'm just not sure that this was the right way to do it, at least for the position that he's in. As a priest, he was speaking about bishops in a way that I felt was very disrespectful. Now, I understand the bishops that he's critiquing probably haven't done much to earn respect. I get that. But I'm just talking about respect for the office, not necessarily for the person who holds the office. Although, I mean, in a sense, they're inseparable, right? You don't have the office of bishop just floating around out there. It's usually embodied, if you will, in a person. So I understand that there are quite a few bishops who really haven't earned our respect, but we still need to be respectful to an extent due to their office. And I just feel that line was crossed, but that's my impression. Like I said, I haven't seen a whole lot of his content, but people are constantly bringing them up, and I'm seeing it on social media all the time, and people are asking me questions. So I thought, yeah, maybe it's a good opportunity to do something on his content. And I know you've looked a little bit more into him than I have. So let's hear your thoughts.
Well, I agree with you. I remember hearing about Altman shortly after. Well, maybe we should kind of give you a background first.
Yeah.
Father Altman is a priest of the Diocese of La Crosse in Wisconsin. Go Pack Go. And he was basically a simple parish priest. Nobody had ever heard of him prior to a video that he had, I think it was professionally made, and I think it was on YouTube on a channel called Alpha News. I'm not familiar with that particular company, but it was at least a 1 or 2 parter, and he made some very bold statements. Things along the lines of, if you can't be a Catholic and a Democrat, or you're going to hell, or something along those lines, if I remember correctly. Please, anybody correct me if I'm wrong. I'm kind of just going off the top of my head from memory, but and that I remember I was out walking here in town, and a priest friend of mine called me, and he was just like, he's like, "Did you hear about this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "What do you think?" And I said to him flat out in private conversation. I won't say which priest friend, but I said, "Yeah, he's going to get it. He's going to be in trouble. You don't talk like that and not have a little note from the chancery office."
But let me stop you there. We should be able to talk that way. We should be able to say those things. I mean, effectively, the reason why he said that is because, this particular group is not defending the unborn. And so how could you in good conscience be a member of this party when it has certain positions that are against life and are pro-death for infants? I get that. I completely get what he was saying, and it's sad that we can't actually say that in some cases. I'm talking about priests.
Yeah, I personally think he could have nuanced it a little bit better myself. But with respect to, I mean, your point is taken, as it's well taken. I understand.
Sure.
But
we could definitely nuance it.
My nuance,
Yeah. But the gist
there are
of
people who identify as this. If I may use the popular expression, there are people who identify as Catholic and are Democrat, but are also pro-life. Yeah. And I can imagine some of them probably would have been like, "Wait, what?" A couple months ago we talked about Bella Dodd. Well, she was a Democrat. But then granted, that was the 1960s, where, fast forward 40, 50, 60 years, the Democrats of yesteryear are not the Democrats of present, of course. And so that's why I said, I think kind of some nuance might have been called for.
Sure.
I personally think I probably would have said it more along the lines of, you can't be Catholic and pro-abortion. I think that certainly would have been a safer bet, for lack of a better expression. But at the same time, it's like there's a lot of the rub with Father Altman. There's so much that it's like, oh my goodness, you're walking right up to that line and you're dancing all over it. How exactly do you, it's almost like Maria from The Sound of Music. How do you catch, how do you catch a moonbeam? How do you catch a moonbeam in your hand? Because it's just all over the place. And so you have to be extremely careful in discussing these matters, because they're very sensitive, and they require a lot of caution. And with me involved with languages, especially, I kind of just say, well, let's finesse and nuance this a little bit more.
But you know what people are going to say, though? They're going to say, but wait, Jesus didn't necessarily nuance and finesse everything. Sometimes Jesus said things that were very, very hard to accept. I mean, John 6, right? Many went away because of a hard saying of his. And I mean, he said some pretty serious things to the Pharisees in Matthew 23. So people are going to point to those examples and say, well, this is okay because we see this with Jesus, and sometimes Paul, and sometimes this and that, and this person. What would you say to that?
I would say that we have to take seriously the warning of the fathers with respect to anger, and this is a subject that is in play with all humans. not just Father Altman. The fathers will tell you there is a righteous anger, but you also have to be very careful because we are fallen human beings. Simul lapsus et redemptus, lapsed at the same time redeemed, at the same time lapsed and redeemed. And so we have to be very, very careful. Yes, Jesus did these things. We have to acknowledge that fact. But he was also the eternal Son of God, and had correct passions, as it were. And so we have to be
that's
very
my thing
cautious.
is, are we in that state where we can balance things out and we are careful in how we conduct ourselves and how we use these passions? Are we at a state where we could do this without sin, as perhaps Jesus obviously is, and maybe some of the apostles and church fathers were? I personally would want to say I'm not there yet, so let me just take a different approach, because I don't know. It's hard for me to discern exactly when my anger is a righteous anger and when it crosses over into sin. Now, there are some clear-cut examples. Somebody asked me one yesterday. Somebody's knocking at your door and they want to attack your children or something. What do you do? Obviously, you can engage in righteous anger and violence in that case. That's pretty clear-cut. But with some of these scenarios, it requires a little bit more prudence. And sometimes it's hard to discern, okay, how do I know if I've crossed that line or I haven't crossed that line, going from righteous anger to something that's unrighteous? I don't want to deal with that, so let me just put it to the side and take a different approach. That's me, though.
Yeah. No, exactly. Somebody in the chat room asked, this is one of the gotcha questions. This is the fallacy of the loaded question. Let me read it here. Why is speaking the truth anger, quote unquote? That's a logical fallacy of the loaded question, because if it's set in such a way, and I'm not trying to insult the person that said this, because they're expressing themselves by making an honest point, but it is still the loaded question. And this, I find, is a lot going on here. It's not that preaching the truth equals anger. That's bad logic. You can preach the truth in love or preach the truth in anger. And so we have to be careful which one we are doing. And I'm not saying Father Altman is doing this in anger. Please bear that in mind. I'm not making any judgments upon the man. The only person who has the right to make that kind of a judgment after Father Altman would be his bishop, as far as I'm concerned, at least. Because his bishop, Father Altman, put his hands at his holy ordination into those of his bishop, promised obedience. And so if his bishop disciplines him, the bishop has the right to do that. Now, he ought not use that authority lightly, of course. No bishop should use that authority lightly. No one's saying that. But we have to be, these are the distinctions. And because of the media presence surrounding Altman, this is a very, very hot question right now. And I myself am debating interiorly how much to say, and what to say, what to reveal, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes that people don't know about. There really, really is. And I know that sounds, what's so mysterious, But, I was talking with some friends over in Pennsylvania recently, and I said to one of them, I said, you have to begin by basically become a detective, I said. You have to begin by asking the basic questions. Father Altman went from, not in a rude sense do I say this, but just simple fact, he went from being a nobody around this time a year ago, nobody knew who he was outside of his diocese, or maybe a few people, to all of a sudden this media sensation. How did this happen? Who did this? Who found him? Who has continued to throw him out into, put him out in the limelight? These are all very simple questions. Now, I'm not trying to imply malice. There was malicious intent. I'm not trying to imply that. But I'm saying we need to get some of these basic facts down in a critical assessment before we start saying, oh, so-and-so's a hero, so-and-so's a saint, or et cetera, et cetera. I have not personally met Father Altman. One of my good priest friends is friends with him. so I'm not making any judgments upon anybody. I want to be
Yeah.
very clear. I'm trying to
Sure.
keep this elevated and on a high level here.
Sure.
The only person who has that right after Altman himself and God and
Yeah.
Altman would be the bishop. And
Right.
the bishop has seen fit to do this, to discipline him as of July 9th. But this was one of those rubs. How is it that Altman gets disciplined and others get to run amok in the church and spread error, possibly heresy?
Like
this is where this is an in or unequitable treatment of problems within the church, and this is where a lot of people are talking about. This is a sticking point for a lot of people, and hopefully we can maybe talk a little bit more about that. I do have some thoughts for people's.
Well, let me make a comment there. I would say that I completely get that tendency and inclination to take that approach and say that I completely understand. I mean, why hasn't Father James Martin been disciplined, and others who are in that same category? Why haven't they been vehemently opposed and silenced and disciplined?
Well, the answer, I'll tell you the answer to Father James Martin. I'm going to get into a world of trouble for saying this, but I actually know for a fact that he gets away with what he does because he is protected by very powerful people.
Right.
And and that has actually been stated to my face by somebody who crossed swords with Martin privately. It was all privately, but this person found out this person was absolutely humiliated by how James Martin proceeded in that affair. And I probably shouldn't say more than that, but it suffices to say the story that got to me was he is protected. You will do what I tell you because he is protected by very powerful people.
Yeah,
and that's the reason why.
I think that's pretty obvious. He definitely is. But I understand why some are saying, but wait, why discipline Father Altman, but not guys like this? And I get it. Well, number one, it's not always the same bishop involved, but we do still have a pope, and I think the pope should be disciplining some of these people and intervening. And so at the end of the day, there is still some responsibility, I think, on the papacy. But be that as it may, yeah, you might even find a bishop who himself is inconsistent, where he might not discipline the liberals in his own diocese, but he goes against some of the rad trads or somebody like that. And yeah, that's not right. I mean, be consistent. Do that for both. I mean, do that for anyone who's problematic, not just somebody who's really more of a radical traditionalist. You also want to discipline the liberals to be consistent. So I get that there is some inconsistency here, but it just kind of reminds me of, children who say, well, my brother and my sister did this or did that. They got away with it. So if they can break the rules, why can't I? That's what it reminds me of. Well, okay, just because so-and-so broke the rules and they didn't get disciplined doesn't mean it's okay for you to do so. But yeah, it does also mean that maybe mom or dad is being inconsistent themselves.
Yeah, and that's kind of the issue here. It's really a crisis in understanding what it means to be a spiritual father. I'm actually been working on an essay that gets into a lot of this stuff. When it comes out, if it comes out, it's going to be a blockbuster. There are going to be people that are their eyeballs are going to be bulging out of their heads when they read what I'm thinking of putting out here, it really goes back to Crisis of Spiritual Fathers. There's videos on YouTube. You can watch them. Some of them are funny. Some of them are not some. A lot of them are serious. That shows dad reactions when a child is going off, going to run into the mailbox when they're riding the bike or something. Dad reflexes. You don't need, as I say in the article that I'm working on, 1,000 meetings of the USCCB and a summit in Rome to tell you the things are wrong. And even though the church knows that these things are wrong, but I just see it as more of a crisis within the priesthood, a lack of faith first and foremost. Today is the 104th anniversary of the Secret of Fatima, and I have to honestly say I'm convinced that what we see in front of us nowadays is all linked to Fatima and a crisis of faith. It's apparent to me, and so that has crept into the seminaries. It has crept into the priests that are that we have nowadays, and in many of them at least. And there's bad formation. There's very, very bad formation out there, and we have to be extremely careful. And so, when it comes to spiritual fatherhood and the present situation, people are starving.
That's been my observation. That people are flocking to figures like Father Altman because they are starving. They're looking for guidance. They hear a priest who says some right things and they think, okay, here's somebody to look up to. And I'm not saying he isn't somebody to look up to. I'm just saying I think people have maybe jumped the gun and assumed a little too much. Again, I don't know a whole lot about him to really judge him and say whether or not he is a good or bad priest or anything like that. I don't know. But what I'm saying is I have seen some things that were concerning. So
yeah, like if people look up, Thomas Aquinas is an excellent guide. I'm just going to lay it out. He's not like perfect, but he's an excellent guide. And if you look at the Summa Theologiae, the Secunda Secundae, question 138, article 2, or articles 1 and 2, he's talking about the virtue of perseverance and the vices that are opposed to it. So if the old Latin expression is true, in the middle stands virtue. Well, if the middle, then you're going to have a left and a right, so to speak, and these are your extremes. On the left or right, depending upon however you want to put it, you have the vice of effeminacy, and on the other side, you have the vice of what's called pertinacity. Effeminacy is when you don't want to do the good because you fear the pain that's involved. You're addicted to pleasure, right? Mm-hmm. But pertinacity is, as Aquinas says, when somebody basically goes overboard. He applies the sledgehammer to the gnat, as it were, and that's. It's a form of, like, among many people we would call it like male bravado, maybe even machismo. So you have to be cautious of these two extremes when it comes to the virtue of perseverance, right?
Right.
And we have a lot of pastors that priests that aren't standing up, that aren't being men. I've seen this myself, and it's horrible. And other people are waking up to this reality. The expression that I'm finding, a priest, I think, in the Archdiocese of New York wrote an article about it last year, I think, for Catholic World Report, called it being red-pilled. People are being red-pilled. They're waking up, and they're saying, "Oh my goodness, all is not well on the Western front here."
Right.
And they're starving for true spiritual fathers to guide them. So you have people that are making all kinds of distinctions, and which distinctions are good and nuanced and whatnot. But at the same time, the people of God are not being challenged as they need to be unto salvation. And a lot of them don't live edifying liturgical lives. There's no mystery. There's no romance. Oh, I can't wait to talk to you about that aspect. There's no romance in the liturgy anymore. That's a whole topic unto itself for another time, or maybe we'll get to it tonight. I don't know. But people they're living these anemic. A lot of people living anemic lives in their parishes liturgically, and so now when you have somebody that has a professional done video, is making bold statements, heads are going to turn. Heads are going to turn, and that's the situation in which we find ourselves with Father Altman. That's one of the reasons why he's so big and so popular outside of the production value of these things themselves. He stands up, he says bold things that people have. It's almost like the Donald Trump syndrome. He says what a lot of people are thinking, but don't dare say aloud. Well, you have to be careful with that. There's power. That's a fight. That's a burning fire. If you're not careful, you're going to get burned. And so with Altman, this is touching upon that virtue of perseverance. No one's going to accuse him of being effeminate. No one. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody else would either. But I would caution him. I would, if he's watching this broadcast tonight, I would caution him to say, Father, you have to be very careful because he has said things that are just outrageous and inflammatory.
Give me an example.
All right. Did you know? I defy anybody in this chat room to find this out on their own or to figure it out. In that video, Episcopal carpet bombing,
Okay.
he called Robert Cardinal Sarah a modernist.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. That's
how many people know that
too
though?
far.
How many people
I recall
know
that? Yeah.
But no, he didn't say it by name. Unfortunately, the Church Militant website is down. They're having issues, I suspect, with their servers. But here's what he says, according to the transcript. I brought it up in a Google cache. Mm-hmm. He's talking about the recent change in the mass collects, the prayer, right. In the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever, amen. It's changed now from one God simply to God, forever and ever, amen. But this is what he says. As soon as I could, as soon as it wants to, let's see. And so we implore the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. He is one God, of whom we were constantly reminded until some modernist tried to change the words of the collect, because after 2,000 years, the concept of one God has become confusing to everyone. It is a proposition made with not even a scintilla of evidence. But I'll do this actually in my impersonation. No, never mind, I won't do that. But he says, be wary, dear family, when the modernist liturgists come at you with some sweet-sounding change. The Lord God commanded worship in a specific way, and yes, Virginia, God damns those who mess with his commands. You know, that's a bad impersonation. But
yeah.
Here it is. He says,
kudos for trying.
He says the one that made this change is a modernist. Well, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops flat out stated that they received a letter from Cardinal Sarah, who was then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, that told them, hey, everybody, guess what? The Latin is Unitate Spiritus Sancti Deus, per omnia saecula saeculorum, not unus Deus. You need to fix that. It should be in line with the documents that we crank out here about liturgical translations. You know, so it was Cardinal Sarah. Hardly a modernist. Hardly. He enjoys a very good reputation, even among traditionalists. You know, no sooner did he leave the congregation for divine worship, that the Pope, has a visitation of that particular dicastery. You know, and a lot of the traditionalists were up in arms over this, saying that's a judgment on Sarah. And I make no judgment upon what the Pope's intentions were. I haven't asked him. But my point is, Sarah does not enjoy that reputation. And to call him a modernist is not only it's a mistake, it is defamatory. And it betrays a lot. And I'm not in a position to judge Father Altman. All I will say is, his statement was incorrect, and he was going to catch unholy you-know-what for that. And so these are the things that he says that's just outrageous. And he's not thinking first, and you have to ask yourself why. You know, but that's I can't judge that. That's not for me to decide.
Right. Yeah.
I can only say there's a problem. You know.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speculate on intentions or any of that. Yeah, so I agree with you. Now, what are some other examples? You said there are multiple things that he has said that are inflammatory. That's one example. Do you have any others?
The only one that comes to my mind, and this may be a gross oversimplification, but it was carried in an article by Catholic News Agency. Supposedly, he made a statement to the effect of how Jesus did not choose women to the apostolic ministry because they can never arrive at a point, and they expect everybody to know their minds. You know, I read this and in that article, and I was like, oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, if this is true, I'm sorry, but that's just horribly sexist. You know, I mean, because I could put Altman is a lawyer by secular profession. I'm not sure how many people know that. I can put him in a room with a lawyer that I know who is a female, and I guarantee you that argument ain't going to hold. It's just not going to hold. Not for that to be logically true, every woman would have to be that way, and I can't say that for every woman walking this planet. And when I read that, I didn't see it in whatever video or homily that he said. I didn't see the original source, to be fair. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to presume that Catholic News Agency, when they're putting quotation marks around stuff, that they've got it accurate and hopefully within proper context.
So if they took him out of context, I would expect him to come out and say something in the same way that we're constantly asking Pope Francis to come out and clarify whether or not he denied the eternality of hell or something like that in an interview. The same way that we have those kinds of expectations to make clarification, we would expect Father Altman to make the same clarification if he didn't in fact say that.
Yeah. And I could probably sit back and have a wonderful conversation with Father. Like I said, he knows a good priest friend of mine, and I'm sure we could sit back at a local pub or bar if he's into that. I'm not, but I'd go if he would, if he wanted to, and we could probably have a wonderful conversation. And insofar as he's up for challenging people, I'm from Boston. If we don't like it, we just tell you.
Yeah.
So I could easily get my Boston up, as it were. And, that'd be a conversation for the ages right there. Watching the repartee and the rattling sabers, that would definitely be a fun thing. People like internet blood sporting, apparently. Well, that'd be definitely sit in the front row just to get the blood splattered on you, But at the end of the day, you sit back, and when the argument is over, it's over. You kick back, you have a beer, you laugh it up, you have fun. I'm sure we could probably do that. I'm sure, Yeah. And so I would very much like to hope meet him someday and talk to him. But like I said, I can't make any judgments upon anybody, but I do have to judge what I'm seeing action-wise.
Right. And that's where I want to keep it. I don't want to judge his intentions and him as a person. I don't know any of that. I just want to judge, okay, well, what is out there and what can be said objectively. I mentioned something that I found concerning, again, that video Episcopal carpet bombing. Are there any other things that you felt were concerning, or were those the two things?
I think it's very disrespectful to call a bishop by his first name.
I noticed that too.
What
was going on there?
Father Altman has flat out admitted it. On June 24th, he gave a talk, and he openly stated, I have the quote. I have the video. I can pull it up and show you. I actually have it right marked. And, he actually stated during this conference that when I get angry, I call these guys by their first name.
Okay.
So when he admitted that 10 days after the Vortex episode aired, the Episcopal carpet bombing, I said to myself, well, that explains it. I said, now this is not me judging. He said, when I get angry, I call them by their first names. Okay. So when he calls his bishop William, see, here's what a lot of people don't really realize. Bishop Callahan, this is one thing I will say from behind the scenes. Bishop Callahan is actually a good man. One of my good priest friends had served under him and knows him very well and has personally vouched for Callahan. And so I think Callahan is in a very tough situation. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And if we talk about prelates that are effeminate and don't do what they're supposed to be doing because they're fearing the repercussions, well, I think we might have a good argument here to show that Bishop Callahan may in fact be one of those people that's standing up and doing an unfortunate thing, but that has to be done.
But is he also doing it consistently with the liberals in his diocese? That would be
that's the question. That's the question. See, this is something I've been thinking about, and it's a good question. I guess we'll get back to the question of the first names here in a minute, but and I want to borrow from a principle of canon law. Okay. In American law, we're very used to, from like watching the TV shows like Law and Order or whatever, we're very used to hearing things called precedent. canon law does not exactly acknowledge precedent. It goes case by case, and that's the principle that I want to apply here, case by case, because every case is unique. And a lot of people they've had a lot of frustration about the terrible things going on in the church today. Believe me, and I want to be very clear on this, I am right there with everybody. I see the news like everybody else, and I sit here at my desk, I shake my head, and I'm like, what in the world? It's like, what were you thinking? I get it. I'm not judging anybody. I get it. I'm right there with everybody. However, having said that, truth be told, if at our judgment we want all credit afforded us before a judgment is rendered, or the final judgment is rendered after our death, I would hope that we would give people the same clout, or cut people the same slack. And in this case with canon law, taking the case by case basis, what's happened is a very egregious error. Everybody is taking their pent up emotions about seeing this, and they're being distraught, and they're all now slamming it on poor Bishop Callahan. And I say poor because that's what's going on here. They're slamming it on, he's become like the lightning rod that's channeling all of this angst and these terrible feelings. But yet, has he allowed a James Martin in his diocese? Can anybody tell me that? Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. I don't know. If somebody could tell me, please. Or have people been doing things quietly? Have they really? I mean, this is La Crosse, Wisconsin, folks. I mean, the biggest thing that came out of there was two things: was the false apparitions in Nisida and the Our Lady of Guadalupe shrine under now Cardinal Burke. This is. I mean, when I lived in Wisconsin several years ago, I remember the late great Bishop Morlino, the extraordinary ordinary, telling everybody that the 5 bishops of Wisconsin are united. This is in October 2010. He said this during a homily for which I was present. He said, "We are united." He said, in other words, we're getting things done here. And so I think that was before Callahan's days, but still, so people, again, to tie this back, people are taking all of this and they're slamming it on Callahan. And I have to question the justice of that. I have not seen anywhere in the news where someone has got a laundry list of the episcopal sins and shortcomings and failures of Bishop Callahan. The only thing that I see is he's disciplining Father Altman. Maybe Callahan has this. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this: what exactly has Father Altman done that required this response, one basically of silence?
If I were to answer that question, it would go into the area of judgment and personal opinion. Mm-hmm. So just heads up on that. So if you want, I will answer that question.
Well, yeah. I mean, if all you have is just an opinion, you don't know for sure, that's fine. I mean, now that you've stated that, we know where you're coming from. Why do you think? What is your personal opinion? I mean, because that's one of the questions that I have. I mean, what exactly has he done? I understand there are some things that are concerning to me, and I would definitely have a talk with a priest if he said some things like Father Altman has and our bishop. But what exactly has he said? It would be my question.
As I see it, in my personal subjective opinion, open to correction, I think that Bishop Callahan is concerned for Father Altman and going rogue, as we like to say. Okay. I think that Father Altman is buoyed by his passions based upon what he himself has said. He says, when I get angry, I call them by their first names. He has done this a couple different times. He calls his Bishop William. God damn your signature on that document, Blaise Supich. Here's the other one from that Episcopal Carpet episode was, this is what he says to the Archbishop of Detroit, whom I happen to have had the occasion to meet. You know, well, people living in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Why don't you clean your own chancery, Alan, instead of wasting your time worrying about me? What you've done to Father Perone is a disgrace, and it is a disgrace. I know Father Perone. What you allowed members of your chancery to do to that holy priest is a disgrace. I reiterate, it is a disgrace. And yes, I am ready, willing, and able to inform the people about that disgrace. Da, 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 da. So get it straight, Alan, and listen up. I'll teach you the same lesson I had to teach Blaise Supich. You don't talk to bishops like that.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. And it was about 9 minutes of that. And I felt it was imprudent. At the same time, I completely get his zeal. I get the passion. I agree with a lot of what he's saying as far as criticisms. And all that is on point. It's just, it goes a little too far sometimes.
Yeah, you can raise questions of stridency. I think you can raise questions with respect to what I mentioned earlier, pertinacity. And I think that Callahan, knowing already that he is a good man overall, as far as I understand, I think that he's been trying to work behind the scenes. But as the expression goes, I think Father Altman has just gotten too big for his britches. And the bishop has the unfortunate task to rein him in. But again, the sticking point for a lot of people is why him and not others who actually teach error and heresy. Well, are they screaming it aloud? Are they making scenes? Are they fussing? Are they saying these outrageous things? I mean, St. Jerome once said in one of his letters, better to teach the truth, better to speak the truth in an uncouth way than to hear falsehoods with a silver tongue or something like that. Unfortunately, I look it up. I have the book here, but it's not in my living room. But and the point why I bring this up is there are a lot of people running around the church today who have those silver tongues, and they're preaching the wrong things. But like for instance, I'm going to. Dare I make a political analogy? I could get a lot of trouble if I make a political analogy. So I think I'll just leave that one. I'll leave it go. But I'll keep it general. A lot of people want to have their ears tickled. So a lying politician could say what you want to say what you want to hear, and somehow we're pleased about it. But when someone tells you the truth, well, look, I seem to remember that they crucified a guy 2,000 years ago for that. Just saying, because it makes people uncomfortable. Truth makes people uncomfortable,
right?
And that's why truth has to be taught in love. It has to be taught firmly, and in love. And these contexts have to be present. Precisely so that people know that when they're being said, that they know the context from which it emanates. And being as Father Altman likes to fashion himself, a lowly parish priest or a humble parish priest, that group is primarily to his flock. It's not sticking his face in front of a camera saying, unrefined things to everybody, and then going back to the pulpit and smashing around your bishop. That's not how this works. I'm sorry, but something has to be done precisely because of the public nature of it. So I guess you can make a serious argument that Altman, in a way, has brought it on himself. And you can't point out the sins and shortcomings of others in order to justify. Two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, that's one of the first things we learn is when we're kids. He hit me. I hit him back. Don't stop it, both of you. Hit me first. Two wrongs don't make a right. It's that kind of a situation, and I have to respectfully disagree with Father Altman when he makes these appeals to, all of these Episcopal shortcomings as he sees them. I don't think that's the right way to tackle this. But then, like I said, he makes these statements that are just outrageous, like calling prelates by their first name, the one I mentioned earlier, calling Cardinal Sarah not by name but by extension of his logic.
Let me then ask this: some people are going to say, "Look, I think you're straining at a gnat. calling a bishop by the first name. It's not that big of a deal compared to all of these priests who are pro-abortion and all of these liberals and the modernism of the church of blah, 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 blah. Why are you so fixated on him with maybe some imprudent actions and words here and there, but not on the liberals and things like that? People are going to ask that. What would you say in response?
Well, I don't exactly see it as being a tiny peccadillo, and neither do the bishops. You don't disrespect a bishop publicly like that. That could be a betrayal of much larger issues going on under the hood. And so, but again, it's not my competency to follow up on that. That's the bishops, as I said earlier, hand in hand, promising that obedience. And I have not vowed myself to that. He has. And so I don't think it's a small issue. And even that, I don't have a whole list of everything that he's ever said. I'm just discussing the things that I am aware of from what I have looked up. But so overall, I would tell people, don't go by just what's on the facade. Sometimes what looks on the facade, first of all, looks can be deceiving, but also it can betray larger things going on. Steve Skojec of 1 Peter 5, he made a couple of months ago, he made a really, really astute observation. And maybe we can, we can discuss it maybe. If I have it pulled up here, I could read it if you'd like.
Sure. But, while you're pulling it up, I want to also ask another quick question here.
Sure.
Do you think that maybe traditional Catholics that were held to a higher standard, and maybe that is why, things like this need to be addressed? The modernists and liberals, they're going to be the way that they are. And yes, we need to speak against it, but I expect them to engage in sin. I expect them to do the wrong thing. I already expect it. It's not right, but I already know that these people don't know God. They're going to be that way. But for traditional Catholics, I think we're held to a higher standard because we do want to love God and we do want to be obedient to him and we do want to do the right thing. So I think it's a little different when it comes to traditional Catholics. Do you think that we're held to a higher standard?
I understand what you're saying, but I have to tell you it's a very, very convoluted answer because it's very multifaceted. So having said that, let me kind of zoom in on one point and then maybe kind of zoom out and maybe look at one or two others. But I see the merits of saying that the higher standard. I've heard it phrased in terms of how traditional priests actually believe and they actually hold the fear of God in their hearts. Yeah. And the bishops know this. And that's why the bishops can send the traditional guys to do different things and expect it to be done because he knows that they will do it. That's how I've heard it expressed. Father John Zulsdorf once expressed it in terms of how priests get sent to certain organizations that shall remain nameless for rehabilitation or therapy or something. And he said that some, at least one or two of them have gotten to him and said, yeah, we've all realized it's actually, we're a bunch of pretty traditional priests that get sent here, and we're starting to scratch our heads. And Father Zulsdorf, I think, was the one who pointed that out and said that point of how more traditional minded guys are willing to because of their belief in taking certain aspects of the faith seriously, they will do as they are told, and they don't really want to fight because they have a certain understanding of obedience. Whereas, some priests are allowed to say certain things and get away with it. And I've heard it expressed the reason why is because they will bang the drums of war, make one heck of a stink, and the bishop just doesn't want to put up with it. That's how I've heard it expressed. Whether or not that's the truth, I don't know, but that's some of the things that I hear around. I think of somebody like Father Flager in the Archdiocese of Chicago. I think his parish is Saint Sabina. He had an accusation of sexual abuse against him, and the accusation was found to be quote unquote credible under the standards for these things, that is. And he was yanked from the parish. And what was it, 2, 3, 4 months later, he was exonerated and put back into his parish. How the heck does that happen? Every other priest gets thrown under the bus. How does this happen? It's almost like a 2-tier justice system. And this goes back to the point of equity within the church. Equitable application of the law. Why this, not that? And this is what a lot of people are asking. And I find it to be extremely fair question to ask.
But that's in reference to bishops disciplining priests, and I get that. I'm talking more about us as maybe Catholic commentators, perhaps criticizing certain things about figures like Father Altman. Isn't it because perhaps they are called to a higher standard? I have more expectations. I have higher expectations for
law. We're all called to that same standard. But which is Christian charity, and quite frankly, among the traditionalists, I have found that lack of charity. I've been the victim of it. I've taken some very strong stances against some of them with respect to Fatima. I have come out and have said certain things that have landed me in the proverbial doghouse. And you don't even want to know what was said about me behind closed doors. But whispers of which get back to me. So St. Augustine talks about these things. You can have discussions, he says, and debates, but without charity, it's pointless because you're not going to get anywhere. And I think that the great doctor of the church is absolutely dead on that point. And a lot of people don't have charity. Be you liberal or so-called conservative. I don't even like these terms. They're political terms. As people will hear in one of my upcoming Fatima webinars, people forget. This is the great Archbishop Fulton Sheen talking now. He says this in his book, Communism and the Conscience of the West. He says, in so many words, so long as people think that there's only 2 directions, left and right, we're going to stay in these problems that we have. Why? Because people forget that there's another direction, inward and upward, the vertical relationship that leads to God. And from which flows love of neighbor, love of God, from which comes love of neighbor. And when he points this out, it's like, oh my goodness, it's so common sense, right? The good Archbishop. Some trads don't have this charity. Some of them are very, very locked on. But I understand. I'm not trying to let the hammer fall unwisely or unjustly and just go after people for the sake of it. I'm not saying I don't mean it that way. Because again, I'm very sympathetic because a lot of people in so-called traditionalists, they've seen an awful lot of terrible stuff for which they have not seen proper vindication. But it's so far gone that when somebody does look at what they say and look at their arguments again and weigh it against historical facts, like what I did in my book on the third part of The Secret of Fatima, Christ would visit them and they'd still crucify him. And I know that because they did it with me. I'm not trying with, and again, I don't make it personal, but just by way of quick example, I have not said you're wrong. Your argument is completely out of line. What I have been saying, what they haven't heard, a lot of them at least, is your argument is mistaken. Let me show you a higher road. Let me show you a better argument that is more in keeping with the facts, that would be irrefutable. If you talk like this, you're going to have the higher ground in an argument. That's what I've been trying to do. But no. So long as you don't kiss the ring of the 4th secret conspiracy theory, and as I said the other day, by the way, there's a 5th secret, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if you don't play the game. And so people are very frustrated, but we're all called to charity. I know everybody's frustrated. Jesus kind of talks about this. Does he not say in the Holy Gospel that if God had not shortened the days, even the elect would be deceived? We're all going to experience trials and scandals. people up and leave the church. They don't really take seriously, apparently, what Jesus says in the gospel about how these things will come. And woe to those by whom it comes, I think he says. So we have to stand fast, and we have to be smart about it. We have to know how to hold an intelligent discussion when those can be held. So therefore, we also have to know when. We have to have the smarts enough to know when we can hold these discussions, and what would be prudent to say. Like when I was in seminary, you just didn't say certain things. You just didn't. You had to be very careful because people take their positions very seriously. And if you tried to cross those unwritten lines, those invisible lines, oh, you know it. Sooner or later, it will come back to haunt you. Now, granted, that's personal, petty moral peccadillos. We're not talking about, sins against the sixth, let's say. That's a whole different ball of wax. But we're all called to the standard of charity, all of us. And we have to be very smart about how we speak about things, because people do have offices that command a certain respect. Even if somebody is unworthy of their office. I think of somebody like St. Padre Pio. He knew what was happening against him was unjust, but did he go after and rail against the bishop? No. People that defended him, he actually, went after. This was famously portrayed in the movie on Padre Pio, where some guy was like, we're going to do this or the other thing. What did Padre Pio do? He actually slapped him, just went and slapped him. People were like, wait, what? He's trying to defend you. And he's just like, don't you dare ever go against the church. He recognized that authority, even if that authority was being abused. Why? Because even if somebody else was abusing that authority, he still had to be a witness to what that authority should be upholding.
Right.
And all
There's
of us.
There's a scene in the Padre Pio movie where they show that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, either in the church, he goes,
Yeah.
But that's like, we are still called, regardless of other people's failings or shortcomings, sins even maybe, we still have to be the witness to this, to what things should be. We have to keep before our eyes the supernatural, divine, Catholic faith. That is what, if we lose sight of that, we're going to get caught up in the waves of whatever the latest movement is, whatever the latest hypothesis is, or the latest fad, if you will. And, it's so easy. I sit here sometimes and there's a lot of mental turmoil that I go through because you have to fight against yourself. It's easy to join a crusade that seems to have holy intentions right from the get-go. I get it. It's so easy to do that. But, if we also accept the premise that there is a crisis or a certain malaise in the church, a lot of corruption even, if we accept that, then we ought to be thinking to ourselves, is this the hill upon which I wish to plant my flag? Is this going to be healthy in the long run? What do I know about this organization? I can remember first meeting the Legionaries, for instance. Something never ran well with me. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something never ran well with me. And over the years, I had heard the stories about Maciel and the abuse and all that. And then when it finally came out in February, I think of 2009, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, finally, like, whew, it's finally out there. It would have been easy to talk to people and to get to know them, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe even consider joining myself if that's something that had really kind of taken root in me. It never did, but I'm just simply saying, they wouldn't have wanted me anyway. For reasons being that shall not be discussed at present. There's some funny history there. But anyway, the point being is that we have to maintain a certain Catholic sense about us. Even if we have an unworthy prelate over us, we still owe a certain respect. And insulting bishops by calling them in an angry fashion by their first name, you know, a name is something deeply important. That's my name. You know, that's like, if you disrespect my name, that's a fundamental thing among human beings. So it's, like I said, it's not a small thing. You know, people call me Kevin Symonds. I've gotten used to it over the years, and I try to correct people privately if I can. And the way I like to say it is, it's like Richard Simmons, the exercise guy, but spelled differently and no relation, you know. So I make a joke out of it, make it lighthearted, you know, so people don't know that, don't think that I'm, you know, angry or something, you know. But when you say it out of anger, like I was bullied and teased as a kid, and when people go, Kevin, well, you know that they're up to no good, right? So you have to be careful. You always have to have that charity. And when you're just brazenly, and I think it's brazen, because again, Father Altman admits he does it in anger, and that's brazen. When you do certain things brazenly, I don't see the charity there. You know, you can have a respectful disagreement, but you don't. But it's just that, respectful, and you can never, ever, ever, ever violate the law of charity. When you do, there's a word for that. It's called a sin, you know, or at least a shortcoming, or a fault. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to beat the dead horse I don't want to beat the dead horse again, but I'll just simply say it and reiterate it, that we always have to maintain the standard of charity. All of us are called to that. You know, I may disagree with some people. That's fine. I may not even associate with certain people. But, you know, if they were being mugged in the street and a bullet was about to be shot off and kill them, and I could intervene, I would be obliged, you know, to take that bullet. You know, and you never know. Maybe that could be the impetus for them for their own continually going deeper in the spiritual life and conversion. You know, you may not be there, but hopefully you'd be in heaven praying and interceding for them before God. But if you don't have that supernatural focus, you know, I don't know. I've spoken too long. You probably have a bunch of things you want to say.
Well, everybody, go ahead and send your chat questions. Make sure to send them to @ReasonandTheology so I can know which are questions and not just comments. You know, I know personally I've been guilty of taking the same approach that Father Altman has before in the past when it comes to bishops. I totally get his zeal, and much of what he's saying is right, but I'm definitely concerned about the way in which it was done, and that's, you know, effectively just reiterating what you're saying. That's so far my only, or I should say my main thoughts on Father Altman. As I said, I haven't really followed his work intently or intensely or anything like that. I just come across things here and there on social media, but I've been seeing a lot of people talk about him lately, and a lot of traditional Catholics promoting him. And I just wonder to what end, and I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Unfortunately,
would you like to go back to what Steve Skojic said? Because I think it really deserves some attention.
Go ahead.
Well, maybe, you know, I'll probably just better read it than screenshotting it. But he said it's about 2 months ago in response to a guy named William Murphy on Discus under the article "Saying No to Crippled Religion" on 1P5. He says, "I hate to say it, but the entire Altman thing is a disgrace. He rose to viral fame through a slick, highly produced video in which he took easy political pot shots that told his target audience exactly what they wanted to hear. It wasn't rhetoric designed to persuade. It was rhetoric designed to reinforce people in their existing beliefs. It's the Taylor Marshall school of content." Now, again, that's Skojic, not me. Just keep feeding people what they want to hear, play on their fears, throw rocks at their enemies, confirm their suspicions, and so on. It's formulaic persuasion technique, and people eat it right up. And if the things he was saying were truly insightful, maybe it would still be okay. But they're not. And he's a big-mouthed braggart who throws lots of insults at his imagined enemies. They're all leftist losers or godless vermin or pansies or whatever else. It's not masculinity, it's machismo. They're not the same. Sitting at this desk over the years, I've watched again and again as priests like this have been hero-worshipped, then disciplined under the appropriate confidentiality such measures require, then publicly championed as being oppressed for speaking the truth. Except then it turns out that they absconded with the building fund, or were having inappropriate interactions with women, or were actual predators, etc. And lo and behold, their bishops actually acted justly. I have reason to suspect, based on certain sources with knowledge of the situations, that this is even the case with some very well-known priests like Father Phillips of St. John Cantius, and more sadly for me, perhaps even Father Rutler. I think that comment about Father Rutler from the Archdiocese of New York was made before his being found innocent by the authorities. Skojec continues, except then it turns out that it's not always the case. Father Perrone was exonerated, to give a recent example, but it's often enough the case that it should warrant caution. Instead, I have hundreds of naive Catholics who refuse to learn any lessons from history, haranguing me for saying, maybe stop doing this thing that has proven to be a bad idea countless times and just wait and see. The fact that Father Altman presents himself as a martyr and a prophet only bolsters my impression that it's pride, not genuine concerns for souls, that animates his 15 minutes of fame. Time will tell. Either way, we should not be so desperate for heroes, especially not political messiahs. You know, there's a lot there. And I know Steve Skojec personally. He and I went to Franciscan University of Stuma together. I texted him when I read this, and I was just like, dude, you know, like wow, you know, that was just like, you actually said this out loud, dude? Yeah. And he's like, yep, I did. Now, granted, Steve and I aren't best of buds. We don't, you know, text, you know, every day or anything like that. As a matter of fact, he and I had a falling out over Fatima. Time will tell which one it is, but I do think that Skojec is right when he's right to point out that, in so many words, Altman needs to submit himself to the discipline of his bishop. I think that a lot will come out if he does. He will lose a lot if what I suspect is happening is in fact the case. He will be forced to issue a public apology. You heard it here first. He will be forced to issue some kind of an apology. He'll be put in either a parish or some other ministry overseen by a senior priest, or at least some priest who will have this authority over him. And he'll be accused of being a sellout. They broke him, you know, and because he's into politics, they may say the Clintons got to him somehow, you know. That's a joke, by the way. Please don't kill me. He's a traitor to the Republican Party and everything that he stands for with all these things. No, that would be wrong. You know, Skojec, I think, put it well when he said how, and lo and behold, their bishops actually acted justly. You know, some of them haven't acted justly. I call out Archbishop Alan Vigneron in this regard, and Monsignore Michael Bulgarin with respect to Father Perrone. I know Father Perrone. I've had the opportunity to meet him and have a meal with him and be at Assumption Grotto. As far as I'm concerned, the guy's a living saint, as far as I'm concerned. And so Altman is right. It was a disgrace. It was a disgrace what happened to Perrone. So you do have good priests that genuinely have done nothing wrong. And then you have those that are saying a lot of good things, but maybe need some refinement on how to say it and how it comes across and the place it's originating from. And I suspect that's what we have here with Father Altman. And I don't say this with meanness in my heart or hatred. I say it as somebody who cares, because I do care.
I'm eager to see how Father is going to respond to the decree of his bishop. Let's say he does not obey. How problematic would that be?
Well, this is where this is dicey. Ooh, you're going dicey and juicy.
I mean, would he be wrong? Would he be in sin if he doesn't obey his bishop? Or is this one of those cases where, okay, if your superior tells you to obey something, but it's unjust, you don't have to obey? Is that one? Is that what's maybe going on? Or
well, this is the question. This is where you have to make an important distinction. There are the canonical arguments which I'm not a canon lawyer. I am not competent to adjudicate those or decide. But and then there is discipline.
Mhm.
Callahan actually enjoys a wide berth of stuff that he can do in reining in his priests. The specific canonical argument that I have in mind is removing him as pastor of St. James Parish. I don't know the canonical merits of that. I don't know what the case is. I haven't looked at the paperwork. I'm not privy to, and I never will be privy to that paperwork. I'm not a canon lawyer. Why would they share it with me? I'm just a guy that writes about private revelations, but alleged or otherwise. And so I can't speak to the canonical arguments. I just can't do that. But as far as discipline goes, Altman put his hands in the bishop's hands and promised obedience, presuming that it wasn't to anything sinful, and asking him for the past nearly a year now to step back, think about what you're saying, etc. However, whatever Callahan had been doing behind the scenes that we don't know about, if it was along those lines of, hey, I get it, I sympathize, but you got to rein it in a little bit. Let's tone the rhetoric down and the polemics, Yeah, I get it. You're a former lawyer and you're looking to win the argument. I get it, but you're a priest now, and there are things that priests can and cannot say and do, and act like they're lawyers arguing something out in the public forum, but thinking that it's a courtroom is not one of them. Callahan, presumably he's not telling him to do something. If he says to him, I want you to spend time in a monastery for 45 days of your own free will, of your own volition. You can have a car, you can have a phone, you can come and go as you see fit. But here are the basics that you have to fulfill in the 45 days that you're there at this monastery. Yeah, Callahan can do that. Now he can't call the police and tell him, and tell the police, drag him kicking and screaming. He can't do that. But he can tell Father Altman, you promised obedience, and I really think this would be best for you to do this for your own spiritual health. Presuming certain conditions were met, I don't think that that kind of a condition, or that kind of if it was of an order or a command, I don't think that would violate obedience. If there were certain things that were a part of that, yeah, because there are some tactics that are used in the Episcopal order, some weapons that are used against priests, and if some of those tools in that particular fight are used in this case, that's where you got to really look at the nitty gritty, and you got to make a decision. And you have to be extremely cautious of that. But if it's something where it's like, nope, you have a cell phone, you have a car with a full tank of gas, you can come and go as you see fit, but this A, B, C, D, E has to be met while you're there, and I will be getting reports. I don't necessarily see that as being problematic.
There's a question here about Bishop Strickland. We had on the show maybe a few weeks ago, yeah.
Yes.
Can you comment on Bishop Strickland's opinion on this? What do you think about other bishops commenting on this? Is that imprudent or is that prudent?
I'm sure Father Altman is appreciative of having Bishop Strickland's support. As a matter of fact, there was a tweet that went out that pretty much said that to that effect. I don't know if it is wise for one bishop who doesn't have jurisdiction in this matter to make any public declarations about things without consulting his brother, the episcopate, first. Maybe Strickland did, and we don't know. It's possible. I don't know. But I would say, with all due respect to His Excellency, that it might be wise to look at everything first and talk to the local bishop first. And maybe he did. We don't know, but that's not public knowledge if he did, at least as far as I know, it's not public knowledge. But yeah, I don't really think that would be a smart idea for any bishop to do. If they're not the authority, because otherwise it looks like it's bishop against bishop, and it's just there's an expression, a street expression. I can't use it, but it's a garbage show. You know, it doesn't look good.
I don't know what all is going on behind the scenes and what his bishop has observed and witnessed and said and done and things like that. And I want to give him the benefit of the doubt as well. And I know how people have treated me when it comes to social media. You know, there's a lot of people right now bashing him, his bishop, on social media and jumping the gun and jumping to conclusions. And they probably aren't privy to what's going on behind the scenes. And they've done that to myself as well and misjudged me. So I know if I've been misjudged, I'm sure clergy are being misjudged as well. And I wonder if some of that is going on here. I just kind of wonder what all has gone on behind the scenes that might make this a little bit more clear why his bishop came to this conclusion in the decree which he released a few days ago, which might clear up some of the questions and concerns.
But here's the thing, though: you and I won't be privy to that, because that deals primarily with interior forum materials. For the bishop to divulge that kind of information, that would actually be a crime against Father Altman's privacy and his interior life, like spiritual direction, maybe even. Yeah, there are rules that are in place here. You know, somebody in the chat I see said, "Why is Kevin talking and acting like he's above the priests and bishops, like some hipster movie critic with 4 question marks after it?" No. I've been around the block, and I have a fairly good idea of how these things operate, because not only have I seen it, I've been on the receiving end of it. And interior forum matters is something that I happen to know quite a bit about. And that's why I'm very serious about saying Callahan cannot say certain things in the public forum without violation of confidentiality, spiritual direction, maybe even confessional. I don't know. You know, it just can't happen. That's why if you read the statements, they're actually somewhat very circumspect, and they have to be, because the diocese knows things that we simply just don't. And that's why it's always wise to keep our tongues in check. You know, St. James says that the tongue can set the world on fire. You know, oh yes, we've been seeing a lot of that lately. Yeah, I call it COVID craziness. People are cooped up with COVID and they're going crazy. But yeah, so we again, it requires level-headedness, caution, not jumping. It's not shooting from the hip, and just be aware that there's a lot in play here. I have had the privilege to study Catholic theology, and because of that, I see some of these things in play. Not everything. And I have a good group of people that I keep around me, that I talk to and help me. They help me to understand things a little bit more from different angles. But so just people just have to be aware that there's always the more, as one of my professors once put it. There's always the more, and we have to honor that. And that, just to give a quick example, I spent time in a religious community, and there are some things that an abbot or whoever the head is, they just can't say. Like, they may give an order that may seem completely unintelligible, and you don't stand there and argue with the superior. You presume that they are acting in good faith, and even if you don't understand what's going on, you still have to do it, because they are aware of. They're at a different vantage point. They see things more than what the non-superiors do, because they have to know these things, and they make these decisions accordingly. This is presuming a well-oiled machine, where things are going well and good faith is present. It's the same operating principle here. Same operating principle. So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah,
just be careful.
there's no telling what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah, so this one is from Samuel. I don't know if you have seen my comment on last night's video, but I've heard Father Altman say in a sermon that if a teaching is not infallible, then it is merely opinion. I recall something to that effect. Somebody sent me a clip and I listened to it. It was something like that, but maybe if you can give me the source again so I could go back and listen. Let's just assume, though, for a moment that that's correct. And I believe it is. I vaguely recall hearing something like that. But, what if somebody were to say, okay, well, if it's not infallible, it's merely opinion. Is that true? Absolutely not. In that it would be such a fundamental blunder when it comes to assent to the magisterium that that person should be dismissed and should not be taken seriously when it comes to matters of theology. That would be just such a basic blunder.
My first reaction, my initial reaction to that would be, like if we talk in terms of dogma, doctrine, and the theologumena, even though doctrine is not dogma like defined doctrine, if we are still required to give our assent to it, that doesn't strike me as just being opinion. What is it? De fide tenenda and de fide. What was the other one?
Things that are to be believed, definitively believed, and things that are to be held definitively.
Yeah, tenenda is held, but what is the believed? De fide credendi?
Yes, to be believed.
Yeah. I just couldn't remember the proper person. Yeah, right. It's something to be, So if it's believed, something to be held.
Yeah, the first paragraph teachings for credenda. And
so I kind of said to myself, well, if something is to be held, I don't know if I could just strictly speaking call that an opinion, because it seems like a glorified opinion.
But those are still definitive teachings when we talk about something that is to be held definitively, tenenda. But what about authoritative non-definitive teachings, which are the third paragraph teachings? Even those are to be given assent. Now, it's a different kind of assent. Sure, it's not the assent of faith. It's not to be held definitively. It is religious submission of intellect and will. So it's not mere opinion. It's authoritative.
Yeah.
But it might still be reformable. Sure, we recognize that.
Yeah, because
that doesn't mean assent is not still owed. Yeah. And this is just basic Catholic theology. So if somebody were to say that, honestly, if I were to hear somebody say that, I wouldn't take them seriously after that.
Yeah, that's I kind of like, I don't, behind you to your right on the top shelf, maybe a little bit up, maybe not the direct bookshelf behind you, in the third or fourth volume that you have there on the papal encyclicals, and I say this.
Is that Leo?
You'll be able to read Ad Beatissimi Apostolorum, 1915, from Pope Benedict XV. And I seem to recall him saying that we are free to discuss in the public forum and defend an opinion that we may have. However, he says, if the church has spoken on something, we don't have that luxury. Now, I don't have the text in front of me, but I don't recall him saying this only applies to dogma, period, end of story.
That's Pius the 12th too. Yeah, Pius the 12th. Humani Generis. He reiterates it. Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is just well established in the preconciliar era that you have Catholic teaching, the category of Catholic teaching, or Catholic doctrine, I should say. And this would apply to what we would call today authoritative yet non-definitive teachings, and the assent owed to them was well established in the preconciliar era. It's definitely been reiterated and highlighted in the postconciliar era, but all this it's not new. It's there in the preconciliar era, and it's well established. If you just think that it's either infallibility or mere opinion, you might want to reconsider whether or not you should be teaching theology. I don't know. That's just my opinion. Maybe that's too rash of a judgment. I don't know. This one is from Michael. American skepticism of authority, desire for justice for sexual abuses, elevation, politics over religion, and culture chaos are all factors. Thoughts? And by the way, thank you for that super chat. Any thoughts there?
Well, I have to, if you don't mind keeping that up so I can, I'm having some difficulty understanding, if I'm understanding Mr. Bummer correctly, what I'm hearing him ask is, does he want he's saying that these things that he's listed are all factors in the present situation with Altman. Does that
That's the impression that's the impression I'm getting. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see. I don't know if we can tackle them all, but
just in general.
Politics over religion. Yes, Archbishop Fulton Sheen himself even warned against that. I have a quote on my website. I wrote an article called Quisut Deus, Who is Like God, that was published on Catholic Lane. Shout out to Mary Cohan in the chat room. She was my editor-in-chief back then. She had to say it, Mary, sorry. But I put that article out there, and I had a quote from Sheen that talked about this very point, and that it basically says that if we stress this, we're going to turn politics into the new religion, So there is a danger here with that. We're very politicized right now and very polarized here in American society. I suspect that negative aspect of our culture and ethos, if you will, is likely in play here. To what degree, I don't know. But would you mind putting it back? Because I'd have to look. I have to kind of see the other ones here too.
I already moved to the next one. So.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
American skepticism of authority is another one that I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be. Somebody can make an intelligent argument. I'm open to that. I don't know, because a lot of Catholics tend to be fairly, dare I say, obedient or submissive to the bishops. So to what degree, I don't know. What were the other ones what were the other two? Do you remember?
Let me see if I can get it back up.
Well, I suppose I have the YouTube thing. I suppose I could just pull it back a little bit.
Here it is.
Oh, yes. Desire for justice for sexual abuses. Well, cultural chaos, 100% yes. That is definitely a factor here. And believe me, I have a lot to say on that. We could be here a whole day talking about that alone. And desire for justice for sexual abuses. I get it. I understand. I was abused as a child myself, and I say that with certain vulnerability. I get it. I understand. I've experienced dysfunction. So there's a certain sense that wanting for justice, but at the same time, I've had several years to kind of work with that, work past that, and see things in the light of Christ. And that's partly why I kind of argue and say we have to keep charity in mind here. I'm actually dealing with a tough situation right now where I know somebody is arguing with somebody, and the other person doesn't know why there's an argument, but I know why. It's actually kind of dumb. But I'm trying to encourage the person that has the axe to grind, first of all, to acknowledge that they have the axe to grind, and to say you can't be holding on to that. It's going to kill you. So I encourage with that, but
yeah.
With the cultural chaos being a factor, big time.
There's another one here on here. John Paul, thank you for the super chat. Shouldn't the bishops for any public authorities be held accountable for the motives for their policies and actions, i.e. expected to explain them? They're not actually separate from one another. What do you think?
Depends. Well, policies and actions. That's one of those case-by-case bases. If the bishop doesn't have to explain, for instance, why he hires one person, it's just kind of presumed that he's hiring a person to work in the chancery office, let's say, because the person's competent. You don't have to explain every jot and tittle of everything. Otherwise, you get into micromanaging. There's a certain measure of freedom and levity that has to come with the carrying out of one's office, episcopal or otherwise. Now, having said that, I think that there does need to be some more accountability in some areas. You know, personally, if a priest is guilty, I think he should just be defrocked, handed over to the secular authorities, and thrown into prison. You know, and have a cellmate named Bruno. You know, apparently that's what I think. You sit there, you pull it, yeah, boom, you're done. Like, you're done. So then, just end of story.
Likewise, I think
Larry, the cable guy. You know?
Yeah, but likewise, I would also say if you teach heresy and you obstinately maintain it after, being corrected, perhaps, somebody out there might say something and be in error and not know better. But after being corrected by the bishop, you continue to teach heresy, you should be gone. So in the same vein, I think that we should not necessarily, I should say, we shouldn't just hold people to a certain standard when it comes to the sexual abuse issues. Yes, we should there, absolutely. We should also hold them to an equal standard.
Here's a funny thought, though. Why is that not?
Because heresy harms souls, right? I mean, when it comes to sexual abuse,
no, you misunderstand me. No. What I'm saying is, why do we even have to have this conversation in the first place?
Right.
Because you're talking about crimes against the faith, right? We talk about error and heresy, that kind of thing. And there are many multi-distinctions that people fall into in that regard, so that you can't necessarily accuse them of straight up heresy, some of them. But what you can do is saying that they're walking right up to a certain line, they're affecting the discipline.
Sure.
Yeah. But the reason why we're having this is because it's a crisis of faith. And so crimes against the faith, if you have people that don't really take the faith all that seriously to begin with, crimes against the faith are not going to be high on their priority.
Yeah, they don't care about
I've said it out loud. I can get in a lot of trouble for that, but I've said it.
And that's why they're not disciplining people, is because they really don't care about the faith.
Sometimes you have to wonder. Yeah. A friend of mine over in Ireland, let me explain where I'm kind of coming from this, one angle of it. A friend of mine in Ireland was having a conversation with an abbot, mind you. And the abbot said to him flat out, "I don't believe this stuff." And my friend said to him, "Well, what are you doing here?" Well, he has a bed and 3 squares a day. There's no supernatural faith there. So if somebody commits a crime against the faith, what's he going to care?
Yeah.
And you can't help but wonder, does that apply to other people in the church? I suspect so.
Hey, look, some of these bishops...
I'm not going to point the fingers and say, you. But privately, though, if I was in private conversation, I had 5 minutes to say whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
Yes, I would.
Some of these bishops have a lot of money, so I kind of wonder if maybe that's a reason. I mean, they have a lot of money and influence. So I don't know. This one is from Jared. Do you guys think it is good for priests and bishops to be highly visible on social media, or does it often do more harm than good? I don't know. I mean, if they are being obedient to their bishop, I don't think it's necessarily problematic. But if they're kind of going rogue and they're not really listening to their bishop, that's definitely an issue.
I don't know if I could say it much better than that. And I like how Jared qualified his words there. Very good for you, Jared. He said highly visible. So that's open for some interpretation. Now, if you have somebody, for instance, like, say, Father Mike Schmitz, who, by all accounts, seems like a good guy. I'm not striking him here, don't get me wrong. But he has a highly visible profile. Is that bad for him? Well, it really is going to come down to his character, right? You can have a high profile, but if you have the character, if you have the virtue to carry that, God bless you. This all be contributing. If you it'll contribute to being a saint. But if you are not graced to be able to have that, then you have to act within your means. So some bishops may have a higher profile than others based upon, hopefully their character and their virtue, not just like political savvy or, verbal savvy, but, it as with a lot of things, everything, it could be a danger. You have to know your limits. And that's the only thing I would kind of add on to what you said.
Yeah. Well,
let me just clarify. far as I know, Father Schmidt seems like a pretty straight up, honest guy. So let me be very clear on that.
Sure. Well, look, I think we're going to go ahead and end it there. We're at about an hour and a half. I'm almost out of time here, so we'll go ahead and end it there. I know there's a lot of questions we did not get to. Perhaps we can either do a part 2 or something. Maybe we can answer some questions in the comment section whenever this posts on YouTube. We'll see. But I really appreciate you coming on and doing this, Kevin, especially on the spot. I know we kind of we only spoke about it a couple hours before we went live, so I know it was impromptu. So I appreciate you coming on and doing this.
Yeah, no problem. You know, somebody had mentioned 101 Caliber asked if we could do a show on the sex abuse crisis. You know, if that's something that you're open to doing, maybe we can do that too. But like I said, I've seen an awful lot. I have somebody else said they like my spunk. Thank you. But, you know, there's a lot there. There's a lot that could be talked about. And if people are open to that, I'm open to sharing what I can. I have to be careful with things that I say, but, you know, because I have seen certain things up close and personal. And so these things are personal to me because I've seen them. I've been on the receiving end of it. So, you know.
Yeah.
Are you going to take care of this person in the chat room?
Yeah, I've just blocked them. So
Yeesh.
Should be blocked.
You know what? As a matter of fact, I'm just going to. Oh, my goodness. We got another person, too.
Yeah, people are sabotaging the chat. So I'm just blocking them.
Yeah, I'm blocking them, too.
Anyways.
I'm not even bother reporting. I'm just going to block them now. I don't see them anymore. That's terrible.
Right. Yeah, they should be blocked now. So, yeah.
Dyer is sending Russian bots after.
Anyways.
They missed the globe. They missed the ladder. They have to.
Is that what it is? Well, hold on. Let me get it on camera. There it is. You should be able to see it up there. Well, it's top right on your screen. For me, it's my left. So, anyways, Kevin, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. This was really, really good. And like I said, maybe we can maybe broaden the discussion out a little bit more. Won't be necessarily about Father Altman next time, but maybe broaden it out and just continue. And, of course, answer more questions because I see there was quite a few in there, but I'm out of time here. So we'll go ahead and end it. Again, I appreciate you coming on and doing this.
No problem. Thank you. And I think we have our next Fatima webinar at 6 p.m. Central Time on the 19th of July. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So everybody tune in for that. All right. And, of course, you know, like I say, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, check us out, patreon.com/Reason in Theology if you want to support us. And you'll also get access to extra content. I'm going to be posting some additional stuff on there probably within the next few days. So everybody who's a patron, stay tuned for more. All right. Till next time. God bless.